I thought I could handle my mother-in-law's passive-aggressive jabs about my fake fibromyalgia, but at Christmas dinner, she unleashed a tirade that left me speechless and walking out the door. My husband, Mark, stood up for me in a way I never expected, but now I'm wondering if his family's sudden apologies are genuine or just damage control. Can I ever trust them again? I'm going to start by saying I have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, diagnosed 4 years ago after months of testing and seeing multiple specialists. It's not something I talk about much because, honestly, most people don't understand invisible disabilities. I've learned it's easier to manage quietly than deal with opinions about what I should or shouldn't be able to do. My husband, Mark, has been incredible through all of this. He was there for every doctor's appointment, every bad day, every time I had to cancel plans because my body wouldn't cooperate. He's seen me at my worst, when I can barely get out of bed, and he's never made me feel like a burden or like I'm making excuses. Mark's family, on the other hand, is a different story. His mom, Linda, thinks she knows better than everyone about everything. She's not a medical professional, she works in accounting, but she's convinced she understands chronic illness better than the rheumatologists and neurologists who treat me. His dad, Robert, just goes along with whatever Linda says, and his sister, Jessica, is the golden child who can do no wrong. They've made comments before, little passive-aggressive jabs about how I'm always tired or how convenient it is that I get sick during family obligations. Mark usually shuts them down quickly, so I figured they were just typical difficult in-laws. The problems escalated about 6 months ago at Mark's cousin's wedding. I'd been pushing myself all week to attend because I knew it was important to Mark, but by the reception, I was in so much pain I could barely sit upright. My joints felt like they were on fire, and the fatigue was so overwhelming I couldn't follow conversations. Mark took one look at me and said we needed to go home. He was sweet about it, told his family I wasn't feeling well, and we left quietly. But after we left, Linda spent the night telling everyone I was being dramatic and that there was nothing wrong with me. She even said I was probably jealous of the bride's attention and had a pattern of making everything about me. Mark found out from his cousin a few days later and was furious. He called his mom and had a heated conversation, telling her she was out of line and needed to educate herself about chronic illness. Linda doubled down, saying she'd researched fibromyalgia and decided it wasn't real, just something doctors diagnose when they can't figure out what's wrong. She suggested I was depressed or lazy and that Mark should encourage me to see a therapist instead of wasting money on specialists, enabling my victim mentality. I was hurt but not surprised. Linda's the type who thinks she knows better than experts, whether it's doctors, teachers, or anyone with actual qualifications. Things got worse from there. Linda started making frequent comments about my health whenever we saw them. She'd joke about how I needed to toughen up or how young people today are so fragile. She'd ask Mark, in front of me, if I was feeling up to activities, with a vague, concerned tone that made it clear she thought I was ridiculous. She even sent Mark articles about exercise and positive thinking for managing pain, with notes about how I should try harder. The breaking point came at Christmas dinner this year. Mark and I drove to his parents' house on Christmas Eve, planning to stay through Christmas Day. I'd been having a good week pain-wise, so I was optimistic. I even cooked Mark's favorite dessert to contribute and show I was making an effort. We arrived around 6 p.m., and everything seemed normal at first. Linda was her usual passive-aggressive self, but nothing worse than I expected. Dinner was going well, I was feeling okay and keeping up with the conversation. Mark was relaxed and happy, which always makes me feel better. Jessica was telling stories about her new job, and even Linda seemed in a decent mood. Then Robert started talking about his back pain from yard work a few weeks earlier. Linda was sympathetic, telling him to see a doctor and offering to pick up his prescription. That's when Jessica decided to chime in. She looked at me and said, "Well, maybe you can give Dad some tips on dealing with chronic pain since you're such an expert." Her tone wasn't genuine, but I tried to answer diplomatically, saying back injuries and fibromyalgia are different, but that I understood how frustrating pain can be, and suggested he see a specialist. Linda jumped in immediately, "Oh, please, you can't compare Robert's real injury to whatever you think you have." My stomach dropped, but I stayed calm and said chronic pain is real pain, regardless of the cause. That's when Linda let loose. She said she'd been biting her tongue for years but was tired of watching me manipulate her son with my fake illness. She claimed fibromyalgia wasn't real, just something doctors made up to placate hypochondriacs, and that I was using my supposed disability to get out of responsibilities. She said Mark was enabling me by treating me like I was sick. She went on about how people in her generation didn't have the luxury of claiming they were too tired or sore to function, and that I needed to grow up and stop playing the victim. Then she looked right at me and said, "I know exactly what you're doing. You're not fooling anyone. This is all in your head, and everyone can see it. You just want an excuse to be lazy and have everyone cater to you. Well, I'm not going to pretend anymore that there's something wrong with you." Update. The room went silent, everyone staring at me, waiting for my reaction. I felt humiliated, angry, and devastated, but also a strange, calm clarity. I realized nothing I said would change Linda's mind, and arguing would just give her more ammunition. So, instead of defending myself or explaining my diagnosis, I said, "Excuse me," pushed back from the table, and walked to the front door. Mark followed, asking where I was going and saying he'd handle his mother. I told him I was going home and that he should stay with his family. He wanted to come with me, but I said I needed space and time to think. He looked torn, but I was already out the door, heading to my car. The 3-hour drive home was surreal. I felt numb but also strangely relieved. I'd been walking on eggshells around Linda for so long, trying to prove I was worthy of her acceptance, that I'd forgotten how exhausting it was to constantly defend my existence. I got home, turned off my phone, and sat in the quiet. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. About 3 hours later, Mark called, crying, which scared me because he never cries. He apologized profusely for his mother's behavior, saying he should have shut her down sooner. Then he told me what happened after I left. Linda tried to act like nothing had happened, saying I was being dramatic as usual and suggesting they continue dinner. But Mark wasn't having it. He stood up and told his family exactly what fibromyalgia is, how it's diagnosed, and what my daily life is like. He explained that I take multiple medications, see specialists regularly, and have extensive medical documentation. He described days when I could barely move but still pushed myself to work and take care of our home. Then Mark did something I never expected. He pulled out his phone and read from reputable medical sources about fibromyalgia, how it affects the nervous system, causes widespread pain and fatigue, and is recognized by every major medical organization. He talked about brain scans showing how people with fibromyalgia process pain differently and how it often occurs alongside autoimmune conditions. He also revealed something I hadn't shared with his family. A few months ago, I went to the ER for a severe flare-up that left me unable to move without excruciating pain. The ER doctor was dismissive at first, assuming I was drug-seeking, but after tests and reviewing my medical history, he apologized and admitted he'd been wrong about fibromyalgia being fake. Mark told them how humiliating it was for me to be treated like a criminal when I was genuinely suffering. Mark also shared that over the past year, I'd missed or left early from family events 7 times due to my health, but attended over 20 others without complaining or making anyone uncomfortable. He said I'd cooked for their family, brought gifts to every birthday and holiday, and been polite even when they made hurtful comments. Jessica was the first to crack, crying and saying she had no idea how bad things were and felt terrible for her jokes and comments. She admitted she'd thought fibromyalgia was just an excuse for depression, but that Mark's explanation of the science made her realize how ignorant she'd been. Robert was quiet before admitting he'd gone along with Linda's opinions without researching. But Linda doubled down, insisting doctors don't understand chronic pain and that people in her day just dealt with discomfort without fuss. That's when Mark dropped the bombshell that destroyed the evening. He said watching his mother attack the woman he loves for something she can't control made him realize he couldn't continue relationships with people who were actively cruel to his wife. He told them that unless Linda genuinely apologized and educated herself about chronic illness, he wouldn't attend family gatherings. He'd rather spend holidays alone with me than watch his mother tear me down. The room exploded, Jessica sobbing, begging Mark not to cut contact, Robert trying to play peacekeeper, and Linda screaming that I'd turned her son against his family. Mark said I hadn't turned him against anyone, their behavior had consequences, and he was choosing to protect his wife. Then he left and drove home to me. When Mark got home, he was emotionally drained but seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. He apologized for not setting firmer boundaries sooner, saying he'd been trying to keep the peace but realized that was enabling their behavior. We spent the rest of Christmas Day together, just the two of us, watching movies and ordering takeout. It was one of the best holidays I'd had in years, reminding me why I fell in love with Mark and making me grateful for a partner who truly has my back. The aftermath has been interesting. Jessica has been texting me, apologizing and asking to talk. She sent articles about fibromyalgia and seems committed to understanding what I go through. She even asked to come to a doctor's appointment to learn more, which surprised me. Robert has been quieter but sent a thoughtful card acknowledging he was wrong and asking for forgiveness. Linda, however, has cycled through anger, denial, and manipulation. She's tried guilt-tripping Mark about abandoning his family, claiming I've brainwashed him and that she's the victim. She even reached out to extended family to intervene, but Mark has held firm. Final update. A few days ago, Linda called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. She was crying, saying she'd been researching fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and admitted she was wrong about my condition being fake. She apologized for her Christmas dinner comments and asked if we could start over, offering to learn more about what I go through. I was shocked. I'd expected her to double down forever. I told her I appreciated the apology but needed time to process and that rebuilding trust would take work. She said she understood and was willing to do whatever it takes. I'm not sure if her change of heart is genuine or if she's just scared of losing Mark, but time will tell. This experience has strengthened my relationship with Mark in ways I didn't expect. It's shown me he truly understands what I go through and is willing to sacrifice other relationships to protect me. It's also given me more confidence in advocating for myself. I realized I'd been so focused on proving my worth that I forgot I don't need anyone's permission to exist as I am. Living with chronic illness is hard enough without justifying it to people who refuse to listen. Looking back, I'm glad Linda showed her true colors so dramatically. It forced a conversation that needed to happen and cleared the air in a way years of subtle passive aggression never could. Things have continued to evolve. Linda has been true to her word about learning more. She sent me articles and studies and asked thoughtful questions about my experience. She even bought a book about fibromyalgia by a chronic pain specialist. Last weekend, she asked me to take me to lunch to talk. I was hesitant, but Mark encouraged me to give her a chance. At a quiet restaurant, she apologized again, saying she'd spent Christmas night reading about fibromyalgia and was horrified to learn how real and serious it is. She admitted she'd always prided herself on being tough and assumed anyone who couldn't push through was weak. She said she'd never considered the levels of pain and fatigue I deal with and acknowledged her comments were cruel and inexcusable. What surprised me most was when Linda shared her health struggles. She's been hiding arthritis for years because she didn't want to seem weak. Watching Mark defend me made her realize she'd been hypocritical, expecting others to suffer in silence while dismissing their pain. I walked her through a typical day with fibromyalgia, the morning stiffness, brain fog, unpredictable flares, and fatigue that feels like carrying extra weight. She listened without interrupting, clearly trying to understand. By the end, she was crying, saying she couldn't believe how much I managed while still working and being a good wife to Mark. She asked how she could make amends and help me feel comfortable at family gatherings. I told her I just want to be treated like a normal person, not a big deal made about my health, no special accommodations, just inclusion and acceptance. She promised to follow my lead. Jessica has also made a real effort. She brought a care package with heating pads, essential oils, and a book about mindfulness for chronic illness. She said she'd never noticed how much effort I put into being present at family events despite not feeling well and promised to be more mindful. Robert has been quieter but started asking about my hobbies instead of my health, and choosing restaurants with comfortable seating. At a recent family birthday party, Linda had talked to relatives about fibromyalgia, so no one was surprised when I needed to sit or when we left early. She made sure I was comfortable, subtly saving me a quiet seat, bringing me a plate when I couldn't get up. When a cousin mentioned her health issues, Linda spoke up about advocating for yourself and finding specialists, showing she's genuinely learning. I'm still cautious about trusting Linda completely, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Mark has been amazing, checking in to ensure I'm comfortable with how his family is handling things and ready to reinstate boundaries if needed. This experience has brought us closer, and we're talking more openly about how my health affects our lives. I'm learning that standing up for myself sometimes means walking away and letting consequences speak for themselves. Most importantly, I've stopped feeling like I need to prove my worth to people who don't want to understand. I'm grateful for those who support me, and I'm letting go of the need for universal approval.